Frost Mage can feel overwhelming at first. Procs, priorities, cooldowns, everything seems to happen all at once, but once you understand how it all fits together, you'll see the rhythm behind the chaos. This guide breaks it down step by step so you can finally feel confident playing Frost Mage in Mythic Plus. Frost Mage is a proc-based caster that deals damage by chaining together short windows using cooldowns, passives, and freeze effects. You don't have a strict rotation, instead you follow a priority list, constantly making decisions based on what's available each second. At the heart of the spec is a mechanic called Shatter. Shatter is a passive that causes your spells to critically strike more often against enemies that are considered frozen. That's where most of your burst damage comes from. But instead of hard freezing enemies, Frost Mages use abilities that make enemies count as frozen. That's where a spell like Flurry comes in. Flurry is a core spell you'll use often. When you cast it, it fires 3 bolts in a row and applies a debuff called Winter's Chill. Winter's Chill causes your next 2 spells to treat the target as if they were frozen, activating the Shatter effect, even if the target can't be normally frozen, like raid bosses. This is the foundation of most of your combos. You'll usually send out Flurry right before another spell so that Winter's Chill is active when it hits the target. You then follow that with Ice Lance, which hits very hard if the target is frozen, or if you have a proc that we'll talk about right now. Frost Mages have a passive called Fingers of Frost, which lets you cast Ice Lance as if the target were frozen, even if they're not. This is a key source of instant damage and mobility. You get Fingers of Frost from using spells like Frozen Orb, Frostbolt, and other talents. These procs can happen randomly but often, so your job is to use them efficiently, usually during cooldowns or while moving. Ice Lance is your instant cast filler. It's important to be selective with it, especially when Glacial Spike becomes your main damage source. Another proc Frost Mages have is Brain Freeze, which buffs Flurry to deal 50% increased damage. Frostbolt has a 25% chance to generate Brain Freeze, and you would then use it to refresh Winter's Chill. You also have several active cooldowns that generate procs or burst damage. Frozen Orb summons a moving AoE that deals damage and gives you Fingers of Frost every time it hits something. It's a huge part of your rotation in both single target and AoE. Comet Storm is a short burst cooldown that drops 7 comets over a small area. It hits very hard and works well with Shatter and your other cooldowns. Each time you cast Frostbolt, it generates an icicle up to 5, which stores a portion of the spell's damage. Glacial Spike is a powerful casted nuke that consumes all 5 of your icicles to unleash a massive hit. It's your hardest hitting spell, especially when timed with Winter's Chill or freeze effects. You also have real freeze effects from spells like Ice Nova and your water elementals freeze. These root enemies and apply a short freeze, allowing you to activate Shatter on multiple targets in AoE. Frost Nova is also technically a freeze, but it's rarely used in damage setups. When using Freeze or Ice Nova, it's usually best to cast them right after you've sent out your Glacial Spike. That way, the enemy is frozen by the time the spike lands, letting it shatter. Now we'll talk about hero talents. The hero talent tree we're using is Frostfire, and it layers extra synergy and complexity onto your core kit without changing the fundamentals. If you understand how Flurry, Ice Lance, and Shatter work, this tree will feel like a natural extension. When you spec into Frostfire, Frostbolt gets replaced by Frostfire Bolt. It's still your basic filler spell, but now it interacts with several hero talent passives. The Frostfire Hero Talents introduce 2 passive buffs that appear frequently during combat. Access Frost empowers your next Flurry, and Access Fire empowers your next Ice Lance and guarantees a Brain Freeze when consumed. These 2 buffs can't stack past 2 stacks. If you trigger a third one, it overrides the second one. That's why the order in which you spend them matters. When both Access Frost and Access Fire are active, the correct play is cast Flurry first, then Ice Lance. This way, you use Access Frost without wasting it, you trigger Access Fire, which gives you a guaranteed Brain Freeze and a new Access Frost. If you cast Ice Lance first, you trigger Access Fire and immediately generate a new Access Frost, overriding the old one and wasting the buff. The sequencing keeps the rotation efficient and prevents lost value during your most important damage windows. And finally, we'll talk about Frostfire Empowerment. Sometimes you'll see your Frostfire Bolt become instant, it'll hit harder, and do a small explosion in AoE. That's nice when it happens, but it doesn't change how you play in single target. Just cast Flurry afterwards because both access buffs will be up. Frost Mage doesn't follow a fixed rotation. Instead, you work through a priority system based on what's available each global. The goal is to keep your Shatter combos flowing, manage your procs, and spend your cooldowns. Here is the priority list explained in plain terms. Icy Veins. Use it on cooldown. This is your main cooldown and it needs to be active as long as possible, especially with Thermal Void extending it through Ice Lance. Glacial Spike. Cast it as soon as you have 5 icicles. This is your top priority spender in single target, and you should never delay it. Even if Winter's Chill isn't up, with Frostfire you'll usually have Flurry lined up anyway, and overcapping icicles is a major DPS loss. Flurry is cast in either of the following conditions. There is no Winter's Chill on the target, and you've just cast something that benefits from it like Glacial Spike or Comet Storm, or when Excess Frost and Excess Fire are both active. Generally, you would want to use Flurry as soon as it's available. Comet Storm, cast it on cooldown. If Flurry is ready, you line it up together for Shatter, but don't delay it waiting for Flurry unless it's coming up immediately. Frozen Orb, cast it on cooldown. It's great for generating Fingers of Frost and extending Icy Veins uptime. Shifting Tower, use it when Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, and Comet Storm are all on cooldown with at least 10 seconds remaining. It's fine to use Shifting Power during Icy Veins. The cooldown is already ticking down, and Shifting Power helps reduce it even further. The 10 seconds condition applies to the cooldown timers themselves, not the active buffs. Then you would cast Ice Lance if you have Fingers of Frost, or if the target has Winter's Chill on them. Otherwise, Frostfire Bolt, your lowest priority filler, use it when nothing else is available. It builds icicles, can trigger Brain Freeze, and help you generate excess fire and excess frost procs, so while it's low impact by itself, it's still important to keep your rotation flowing. When you're fighting 3 or more targets, Frost Mage keeps most of the same gameplay flow, but a few key things change. Here's what's different in AoE. Before doing anything else in AoE, you would want to have Blizzard ticking and Frozen Orb active. From there, you'll start building Death Chill stacks by casting Frostfire Bolt. Before even diving into your burst, you'll want to set up Death's Chill, a passive that only works while Icy Veins is active. Each time Frostfire Bolt hits during Icy Veins, it increases your spell damage by 1%, stacking up to 15 times. In AoE, aim for 12 stacks before going into your burst window. That's typically 4 Frostfire Bolts. The setup phase might feel slow, but it significantly amplifies your damage once you let loose with Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and Glacial Spike. Cone of Cold becomes a powerful combo tool in AoE if you're using the Coldest Snap talent. With Coldest Snap, Cone of Cold gets a longer cooldown, 45 seconds, but in return it gains 2 massive effects. If it hits 3 or more enemies, it resets the cooldown of Frozen Orb and Comet Storm, and it applies Winter's Chill to all enemies it hits, letting you use Shatter. This makes Cone of Cold a setup spell for huge AoE bursts. You'll often delay Comet Storm slightly until Cone of Cold is ready, then cast both together for maximum effect. Important! Coldest Snap makes Cone of Cold no longer benefit from cooldown reduction, like Shifting Power, so plan around the full 45-second cooldown. Comet Storm becomes conditional. If Cone of Cold is almost ready, you would want to delay Comet Storm until you can use both together, otherwise it follows the same priority as single target. Frozen Orb becomes even more valuable. Each target it hits gives you Fingers of Frost, so it ramps up your AoE potential fast. Use it early in your setup and again as soon as it's back up. Now, Blizzard isn't used in single target, but in AoE, Blizzard should be used on cooldown. It's a key part of your sustained AoE damage, and delaying it too much will lower your overall output. Make sure it's rolling as often as possible. Avoid casting Ice Lance at 2 stacks of Excess Fire unless Comet Storm is coming up. This prevents wasting your procs. Otherwise, only cast Ice Lance during Fingers of Frost or Winter's Chill as usual. That's it. Everything else stays the same as your single target priority. You're still playing around cooldowns, procs, and shatter windows, just with a few added layers on top. Frost Mages rewards players who can stay aware, react quickly, and make the most of short windows. It's not about spamming one spell like it used to be, it's a lot more fluid and instant. If you follow this guide, you now have the tools to start playing Frost Mage, whether it's in a key, a raid, or just practicing on a dummy. If you find this guide helpful, give it a like to help more players find it. Subscribe for more beginner-friendly WoW guides just like this one, and drop a comment letting me know what spec you want to see next. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.